Hey guys, welcome to A Little Bit of Monica. It is time to do my mid-month check-in, a time for me to reflect on the last 2-ish weeks, the first half of the month, the books that I've read, and how I'm feeling going into the second half. I'm also going to briefly reflect on how I'm doing on my TBR. And that is actually where I'm going to start. I think I'm making pretty good headway on my TBR as far as my goals for the month. Specifically, the books that I planned on reading, I am actually getting through quite a few of them, but the fact that 2 of my goals for the month were to, 1, read my NetGalley arc. I have in fact turned around 3 arcs already this month, and I have also read 2 special editions, which was one of my other goals. So I feel like I'm making some good progress. We shall see how the rest of this month is going to turn out, especially with the holidays that are going to be interrupting my normal reading flow, but I am excited nonetheless. But let's get into my book reviews for the books that I read in the first half of this month. As I typically do for my mid-month, I am just going to go in order of how I read them. Starting off with the first book I finished this month was Haunted Ever After by Jen DeLuca. Now I did start this one in November. I didn't finish it until December 1st, so that's why it's starting off here. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It is a nice, pretty short romance about a girl who buys a house in Boneyard Key, this really small town in Florida that is pretty much known for being one of the most haunted towns in the country. Now, she moves here into this house not knowing the history, not knowing anything, but she very quickly discovers that the house she moved into is supposedly haunted. And she's going to discover that a lot of the town is hiding lots of ghosty secrets. And Cassie, alongside the cafe owner Nick, is going to discover just what this town is hiding. I loved kind of the cozy, spooky progression of this book. There's a lot of tension, and there were some things that happened in here that I really wasn't expecting, but ultimately I just really love the interactions with the supernatural in here. It reminds me a lot of Happy Medium by Sarah Adler that I read earlier this year, just as far as the ghostly interactions go. I honestly had a really good time with this one, and I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. Next up was the sequel to a book that I read in November, To Shatter the Night by Catherine Quinn. This was one of the arcs that I read, so I am really excited that I was able to turn this one around. I technically got the arc before I actually read the first book in the series, and here's the thing, I ended up giving both books 3 stars. So I really liked the first one as far as the setting and the plot. I feel like some of the interactions were a little bit off, but the vibe was there and I was enjoying it. It's also a very slow burn as far as the romantasy goes. It's very YA. The character does behave very, very YA. Honestly, that's all I can really say. But for book 2, I really just felt like it lost me in the middle quite a bit. At one point, I was vividly imagining Labyrinth, which like isn't a bad thing because I love Labyrinth, but I do feel like it just, I don't know, something about the second book just was not working for me as much as I had hoped it would. I think the main problem with this book was the world building. I feel like it was very intricate but not explained super well, and so I was left to my own imagination of trying to figure out what was going on. There's a lot of talk of gods. There's a lot of fate discussion that I don't know, it just wasn't working in my brain, and so I wasn't loving that. But ultimately I do like how the story ended up rounding out, and so it felt very average to me, which is why I landed on a 3-star rating and why both the first and second book ended up getting 3 stars. I do think I liked the first one just a little bit more, but honestly they are pretty solid for YA fantasy or romantasy, so I can't complain too much. But yeah, they were just kind of 3 stars, so I don't really have a whole lot else to say. The next book up on my list is my highest rated book of the month so far, Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. This is the continuation from The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I read that one back in September. Absolutely obsessed with it. I read that one prior to going to an event where TJ Klune was speaking, so I have read this one now after hearing him talk about it, and honestly, it just makes me appreciate it even more. This book is going to focus on the same family unit that is featured in the first book, and it is basically an island that is an orphanage where there are children who have magical abilities, and they're largely feared by the main population because of what they are capable of. However, the 2 adults that are taking care of them love them and truly do take care of them in the best way possible. Arthur and Linus, I absolutely love them and their relationship and the way that it blossoms throughout this story. Everybody goes through a very intense kind of like self-discovery in this book and understanding what's important to them, and I really love the deep dive we get into some of the additional children, some of the ones that didn't quite get as much of a feature in the first one, but they get their moment to shine in this second book, and I absolutely freaking loved it. But I also cannot talk about this book without talking about the audiobook, because Daniel Henning is truly one of the best narrators I've ever heard in my life. The way he brings life to these children's voices. I hear Chauncey's voice in my head at all times of the day. Like, I'm obsessed with the voices, and it really brings the story to life in a new way that makes you just fall in love even more with these characters, and they're already incredible characters. I just love this book. The next book that I have to talk about is one that I have 2 copies of, and I'm kind of hoping that at some point I have 0 copies because I am selling them both on Pango. I just did not like this book, and I only gave it 2 stars, which is pretty much aligned with a lot of the reviews if you look this up. To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods by Molly X. Chong. Now, I think my review differs from a number of people's reviews, but I still did not really care about this story at all. This story is so incredibly politic heavy that I was just not following a lot of it. It is based off of a real life event, and the author does address this in a note at the beginning, how it is a fictionalized and fantastical rendition of a real life event, and I can appreciate that. However, it was so rooted in that event that it was so politic heavy, and I don't know, me and fictional politics, me and real life politics really, but like I just was not vibing with the whole story in general. Not to mention the fact that the romance becomes an oppressor-oppressed romance where the main character has a death magic. Basically, she can take a person's chi and essentially kill them, but when she uses her magic, it also takes from her own life force, so eventually she will have a shortened lifespan because of her usage of her magic. So she tries not to use it too much until she basically gets captured and is forced to use her magic for the enemy because she's being blackmailed. And first of all, I know that this kind of a plot can work, but it did not work for me in this one. I didn't like the dynamic. I didn't really like either of the main characters, and because I wasn't following the world building in general, it was not working. I was genuinely pretty bored, and in the second half I probably could have DNF'd it, but I really wanted to finish because I have 2 copies of this book and I really wanted to say that I had read them. This is the Illumicrate copy that I was so excited to have. This was the original first edition print, and it had a really shiny cover, so I was excited about it. And then the Illumicrate copy is also just stunning. The edges, beautiful. I love the artwork. Everything about this is so pretty, and I was so excited. And now I'm sad that I have to get rid of it because I just did not like it. I did not care, and I don't want to continue in this series, even though it is book 1 in a series. I truly do not care where the rest of the series is going to go. However, the good news is the next book up is another one of my special editions, and this one I ended up really liking. Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. I gave 4 stars. This one was a lot of fun. It's a murder mystery fantasy. So this one is taking place on a ship. The 12 leaders, basically they're the heirs to their provinces, are all on a ship together, and they are slowly getting killed one by one, and they are trying to solve the mystery of who is doing it. There are only so many people that it could be. It has to be one of the heirs because there's only 12 people on this ship. So the countdown is on. They have 12 days on the ship and 12 people who are going to be dying and trying to figure out who is the killer. So I really like the way this works because each person has a magical ability as well, which is going to complicate matters when they're trying to figure out who the killer is. But I also just think that the story has a really fun and complicated world building, and I really appreciated it. I could follow the world building. I understood it. There were also some guides in the book, like a breakdown of the provinces, a map of the world, and then description of like who was the heir for each thing. So that way, if you forget who the characters are, you could just look it up at the beginning of the book. I loved that. Also, I just feel like the relationships in this book ended up being so dynamic. Our main character, Ganymedes, is not one that gets along with people super easily, and so he is automatically kind of ostracized at the beginning of this adventure, which means it's going to be difficult for him to talk to people and figure out what's going on. But everyone has to both trust and distrust each other on the ship because nobody knows what's really going on. And while he's unfolding the mystery, there is lots of interpersonal drama based on relationships, and I just really truly loved all of the dynamics, all of the different relationships that were pulled apart, and I just thought this was a really fun time. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I do feel like this one is a little bit long at times, and it felt a little more YA than I was expecting. Now the characters are in their 20s, but Ganymedes runs a little immature at times, and some of the characters were really young as 6 years old. Now I did love the 6-year-old. She was one of my favorite characters, as you know, she should be because she's adorable. But I just feel like some of the behaviors and some of the phrases that were used felt a little bit more YA, but this is labeled as an adult fantasy, so do with that what you will, but I had a great time with it, and I'm so glad because this book is gorgeous. This was the January Illumicrate book, so I have had this for a long time without reading it, and I also had an arc of this one, so I got to count this one as a special edition and an arc, so it really worked for all of my favor this month, and I am so happy to have gotten through this one. And then I realized I made a mistake earlier. I said that I had finished 3 arcs, and I lied. I have actually read 4 arcs because the last 2 books that I have to talk about were also arcs. So the next one is A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. Now, if you've been here since last year, you will know that my favorite book of 2023 was by Adrienne Young, The Unmaking of June Farrow. I absolutely was obsessed with this book. I loved it so much. So I was very excited to be reading this next book of hers, which comes out in January of 2025, and I was so excited for this book. Now, this one is definitely a different tone than June Farrow, but I was excited nonetheless. This one is more of a kind of like thrillery, woodsy kind of vibe, because we are following a woman whose twin brother died, and she is going back to their small town in the mountains, in the woods, to figure out what happened to him and to finish some of his work projects. But while doing all of this, she's going to uncover even more mystery, and she's going to realize that his death was not as accidental as people may believe. Then things are going to unravel even more. There's going to be a lot of drama. There is going to be a little bit of a romance that I thought was pretty cute, but definitely not my favorite element of the story. The setting and the environment was for sure the greatest feature here for me. I absolutely love Adrienne Young's writing and her ability to build an atmosphere. That is truly the thing that makes her books feel so alive to me. And so as I was reading this book, I feel like it was very slow moving. There was not a lot going on, especially in the first half of the book, but I was still invested because of the way she writes and the environment that she built, and made me feel like I wanted to be in this place with these characters. And then as the plot started to pick up, that just made it even better. So I really liked this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. By the end, I was trying to figure out the mystery of what happened to the twin brother along with the characters, and I ended up really liking how everything turned out. The one thing I will say is that there was a supernatural element that was hinted at, which would be the kind of fantasy, the magical realism kind of element that this book is labeled as, because it is labeled as being kind of a fantasy fiction thriller, and I feel like the fantasy was pretty much not there, especially not there as much as I had wanted it to be. It was introduced and it was like sprinkled in a little bit, but I wish that there was more fantasy, because I think that part would have been so cool. But I still like the book overall. So 4 stars for this one that will be coming out very soon. And finally, the last book that I finished so far this month is another one that's pretty disappointing, but it is one of my arcs, so I am really glad to have been able to turn it around. And this one, the name is a doozy. That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. Now, this is book number 2 in the Mead Mishaps series by Kimberly Lemming. I did not read book 1, and maybe that is my own fault for not liking this book as much. Would I have liked it more if I had read book 1? Maybe, but maybe not. This book I found pretty dang boring. I didn't really care all that much. I was also listening to the audiobook along with my ebook, and I zoned out a lot because I just didn't care. This felt more of like a cozy fantasy, which is not a huge problem for me, but also I feel like I tend to dislike cozy fantasies more often than I like them, and I did not like this one. I feel like there were too many characters to keep straight, which I think probably would have been better if I had read the first book, because some of the characters do cross over, so that one might be on me. But I also feel like there were so many characters that I just didn't know what was happening, because they're all a different species of fantastical creature, and when they're all a different type of creature, and some of them have multiple different terms that they use to describe the creature, which means at any point they're talking about a demon and a werewolf at the same time. And I was like, wait, but if it's a demon, then it's not a werewolf, because the first book is about a demon and the second book is about a werewolf. So how can they be called the same thing? I don't know. Okay, maybe I was misunderstanding it all, but it was really confusing for me, and it made me not care at all about the plot. At one point, I think the plot was something like women were getting kidnapped, and the main character, Bree, gets kidnapped, and then the guy that she accidentally threw a love potion on and then imprinted on her as his werewolf mate, he then has to go like find her. I think that was the plot. But ultimately the main drama was supposed to be the fact that she accidentally threw this love potion on a werewolf, and then he wasn't sure if his feelings were because of the love potion or because of the imprinting as his mate. I just didn't care, like, at all. So this one was rather boring. 2 stars for this one, because I'm not like offended by any of it. I just simply did not care, and I would not pick this up, and I don't have any inclination to read any of the other books in this series. So that's sad, but at least I got to turn around another one of my arcs. arcs, because that means I really have turned around 4 arcs this month, and that feels so good to be getting my rating back up, because there may also be some books that I'm getting to NetGalley that I need to be turning that rating around pretty quickly. But also it is just one of my ultimate goals to be turning these reviews around as quickly as I can. I don't want to be holding on to these arcs for a long time because I do want to support authors when their books are being released. So that is ultimately where I'm at. I feel like I'm in a really good place this month to have already read 7 books, so I have no idea what the second half is going to bring, but I'm hoping that it's going to be maybe around the same. Get another 7 books in, that would be amazing. But again, with the holidays coming up, who knows how many books I'm going to get through, but I am happy with the ones that I've read so far. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and if you liked what you saw here and you want to see more from me, I invite you to hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with all the things that I have coming up, especially as I am going to be doing a lot of reflecting on this year within the next couple of weeks. So I invite you to follow along with me on that. I would also love to hear from you in the comments if you have any thoughts on the books that I've read so far. I again want to thank you for watching this video, for engaging with me, for supporting me. Every second that you spend supporting me is so very much appreciated. So on that note, I thank you for being here now, and I really hope that I will see you in the next video. Bye!